Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball, who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, you gon' learn today how your team they play, how they play, boy, you gon' learn today how your team they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that SWAC, that MEAC, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee?
All right. Good afternoon, good people. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for tuning in. As you can see, this is going to be a little bit unconventional, not used to what you're used to in normal academic presentations. But hopefully, we can do a few things. We can entertain you. We can inform you on a few things, engage you, as well as bring you into our world. All right. As we're working, like I said, I'll kind of work through it, if you will, without the PowerPoint. I'm not too sure y'all can see the PowerPoint yet, but basically what we're going to be talking about today in our presentation is entitled Sociology of Sport Talk Radio, the counter storytelling of the HBCU Sports Lab. All right, and what we're going to do for you all today is we're actually going to take you again behind the curtains, behind the scenes, to see what we're doing and what we do in Dr. Kenyatta Cavil's inside the HBCU Sports Lab. The way this is going to flow, as I'm doing right now, I'm going to give you all a little bit of an introduction to what we're doing, a little background information, not only about the show, about ourselves, and again, also why this is important to us to show you, right? And then we're going to cut away to actually letting you all into hearing a actual interview live on the radio and through this podcast, through this platform. So you all are going to, again, go behind the curtain, get to see the behind the scenes, and actually be a part of this, right? After we do that, coming back to me, seeing a little bit more of the theoretical side of it, and again, getting you all immersed into our merger, if you will, of both the academic side as well as the entertainment side, because again, this is what this is all about. After I do a little bit more of me, then you all go back to hear more of Dr. Cavil and the show to engage more into what we do as far as discussing HBCU athletics, discussing some of the pertinent topics of today. Then after that, we'll come back to me as well to talk a little bit about what we saw, what we witnessed, take you through, again, some of the theoretical angles, but also, again, explaining to you, again, why this is important, ultimately what our goal is, and then show you, essentially, make you a part of what it is that we do every week and what we do both, again, academically and for entertainment purposes, all right? And then towards the end, again, we'll get into a little bit more discussion, hopefully have time for questions so that you all can engage as well. And by the end of this, again, we hope to keep you entertained, we hope to keep you informed, and we hope to, again, bring you into what it is that we have to offer and what it is that we want to, show you guys, all right? And saying that, again, I'm going to get ready to throw it back to the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, Mr. Kenyatta Cavil, as we go inside the HBCU Sports Lab.
Thank you for that, Dr. Geremy Cheeks of Alabama A&M. This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. As you know, Mike Washington is on assignment. I don't know what he seems to be able to keep himself doing, but that's what happens with us. But we'll see what we can do if we can make it happen. I have Charles Bishop with me. So welcome to this special episode of NASSS Virtual Conference of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast, the show that is covering the sporting HBCU diaspora, all things HBCU sports. For institutions large and small, from NAIA to NCAA, we share the insights and information on HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs and the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-hosts, Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We are filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to KCOH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper in Houston, Texas, home of the Texas Southern University and the TSU Tigers. With that, today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. Episode today's show will be a good one, as we will be broadcasting as part of the NASSS Virtual Conference, as we said, discussing the role of counter-narrative storytelling in creating a didactic platform for the sporting HBCU diaspora, as well as the latest HBCU sports. Later, we will discuss the state of the SWAC during COVID-19, expansion during our interview with Dr. Charles McClelland, Commissioner of the Southwestern Athletic Conference. We'll also have a surprise interview with a Deputy Athletic Director, Southern University, Dr. Travion Scott. And so you'll get a chance to actually hear from those that are responsible for going back and forth in terms of the administrative side of athletics, and we'll mix in a little bit of fun here and there for all to see. With that, as we normally do, giving some shout outs for those that are following us on Facebook. Mr. Chuck Hunt is always in the house. Shaniqua Thomas Hopkins is checking us out. Jola Keys just giving some of our big time fans a little shout out. With that, I'll say that with you, Charles. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Dr. Cavil. It's an honor to be on during this presentation where we can show the conference, what we do on a weekly basis, and that gives you the inside and outside of everything that's going on at HBCU athletics as far as on the court or off the court. So this is fun. This will be quite a joy to come do this today.
With that, give us some news of the day, as we should be bringing in Dr. McClelland quite quickly, and we'll get to some questions on him. Give us some HBCU news of the day, Charles.
Sure thing. So first and foremost, this pandemic that we're going through, it will dictate quite a bit as we look towards planning for spring sports and things of that nature. But in the news, in the HBCU news, South Carolina State, they paused athletic activities after an employee tests positive for COVID-19. South Carolina State, they announced that it is pausing all athletic activities following the revelation that a staff member tested positive for COVID-19. Team practices have been suspended after the first confirmed staff member was found to have tested positive. And this is a quote from South Carolina State President James E. Clark. To ensure the safety of our student athletes and athletic staff, we have made the decision to suspend practices and are continuing to aggressively follow public health and safety guidelines. Also, Hampton University, they have made a decision. They are suspending the 2021 spring sports. Basketball will continue, although. Hampton University Director of Athletics Eugene Marshall Jr. announced that the Pirates will suspend the spring 2021 competition season in the following sports: football, men's and women's cross country, men's and women's indoor and outdoor track and field, co-ed sailing, softball, volleyball, women's soccer, men's and women's tennis, and women's triathlon and men's lacrosse. The men's and women's basketball team will play a modified schedule, which will be released at a later date with games being streamed on ESPN+. Continuing on in the news, and again, like we said, that the COVID-19 and conferences and teams are having to make decisions basically on the fly and make decisions for the best for the student athlete. The SIAC, the football championships, are off for this spring. This comes to us from HBCU Game Day. The SIAC announced that its athletic plans for the remainder of the 2021 academic year does not include a football championship. The league announced this past Tuesday. It will not be sponsoring football, cross country, or women's volleyball. Basketball, although, will be moving forward with a limited capacity. The men's and women's schedules will begin on January 10th, with teams playing a 12 to 14 game schedule. From that point, they will play in a SIAC basketball tournament, and recently admitted Allen University will take part in that tournament. Any games played on a SIAC campus will not allow fans to attend. So those are a couple of things that are going on within HBCU news. Dr. Cavil, of course, basically the pandemic really dictates what conferences and what schools are, what sort of decisions they'll be making going forward.
No doubt about it. It's been fascinating when you just talk about COVID-19, and you've seen in a lot of ways a different approach to HBCUs for the most part, institutional-wise or in terms of the conferences. We saw that many of the HBCU conferences were leading the way back in the fall when a decision was made for the most part in regards to how things would look with the CIAA and SIAC basically made a joint statement in regards to what they were going to do. And then you saw with MEAC making an announcement, and then finally the SWAC making an announcement in a lot of ways. And so that's just where we are in terms of HBCUs. And a lot of this is associated with the finances in regards to these programs and actually the culture. You've heard so much about COVID-19 and how it has affected minorities, specifically in this case, the African American and Black communities. And so when you talk about fans in the stands, that's a different disposition. What you can see, what you've seen taking place in the SEC, if you would, or the ACC, or even the Big 12, and then later the reversal of decisions by both the Big 10 and the Pac 12. And you see with some of the differences that they're having to deal with cancellation of games. So you have a cultural norm that is taking place as well. And so what are some of your insights in terms of what that looks like, Charles?
Well, I think it's important. I think you touched on it in terms of the effect that COVID-19 has had on minority communities. So with that being said, commissioners are having to make decisions in regards to how they're going to look at going forward with or without athletic competition, with an eye towards not only the fans but the student athletes. So they're making decisions in the best interest, I think, of the fans and the student athletes, because as you said, I think COVID-19 has had a disproportionate effect on minority communities. So you must do what's in the best interest of safety.
Yeah, with that said, I wanted to move on. What were your thoughts on the Black College Football Hall of Fame announcements? But with that, we have our first guest, Dr. Charles McClelland, the commissioner of the Southwestern Athletic Conference, on the line. So we'll jump right to him. I know his schedule is extremely busy, and so we're going to let him go at the top of the hour. So let's jump to him, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the Black College Football Hall of Fame announcement of the finalists in regard to that. And knowing Dr. McClelland, he may even have some insights of his thoughts of during his day of some of those folks that are coming out of there. So we'll get a chance to mix it all up. With that, welcome to the show. None other than the commissioner of Southwestern Athletic Conference, Dr. Charles McClelland. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you for having me on the show, and Clem Daniels for the Black College Hall of Fame.
Yes, indeed.
Sounds like you're going back a little bit there in terms of Prairie A&M University, an NFL great, Houston Oilers. People may or may not realize his history, and not in terms of his talent and playing in the field, but also he was part of that core group that desegregated cities in the South, particularly when they decided as an NFL, particular groups, African-American players, to not participate in New Orleans for the game there
Super Bowl.
in regards to that. And then it ultimately got moved to Houston in terms of the pro game that was played there. What are your thoughts in terms of that?
Yeah, Clem Daniels, a trailblazer. He was a Prairie View graduate, way ahead of his time from a social justice standpoint. When Upshaw was a part of the NFL Players Association, he was president. Clem was strategically involved in that, not just from a playing standpoint. When you go back to his days, he was an outstanding player. And just look at the impact that he's had, and a lot of people don't know behind the scenes. All the way up into the death of Al Davis, Clem Daniels was his right-hand man. And even after the passing of Al Davis, Mark Davis, whom is president and runs the company, and Mrs. Davis kept Clem Daniels there in the press box, kept Clem Daniels on the field because of the impact and the significance he had in 1967, 68, and throughout his career. So Clem had his hand on the NFL even after his playing days, all the way up until his passing a year and a half ago. So his impact is not just what he did on the field, but off the field as well. And a lot of the players don't understand the significance he has with their voice being able to be heard even today. Clem was instrumental in all of that.
Thank you for that, Charles. Great insight. I told you can't get it any place other than here on Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We are interviewing SWAC Commissioner Dr. Charles McClelland. We go back a ways, but we're not going to get into some of those conversations in terms of Prairie View A&M University, but we'll stick a pin in it and leave it there because I know you have some great stories. With that, what is the formal conference process that ultimately had led to the decision? And we kind of talked about that, and this is back in the fall, so I don't want to take us back a little bit in terms of counseling, if you would. And really, it was a postponement because the idea is to play in the spring, these fall sports. Amongst all the different chatter was out there with a lot of conferences in a lot of ways saying that they were going to push forward. Can you take us back to that, and then we'll kind of move forward with some questions in terms of what's going on currently?
Yeah, and a brief synopsis, everybody talked about health and safety of the student athletes. That was our number one priority. And we wanted to make sure that we understood COVID/football environment. And we've been able to get a very good look based upon what the other conferences have done, the Autonomy 5, as well as the Group of 5. So a lot of lessons learned that would allow us to have our spring football successfully. We'll take the positive things that we've learned, use those, and all of the negative, we'll be able to learn from those as well, and hopefully not repeat some of the same mistakes. So just wanted to keep them safe, keep the coaches safe, keep the fans safe, learn a lot, and we've learned a lot. We've learned that the transmission rate on the field is almost non-existent. A lot of institutions have tested positive from a student athletes and coaches perspective, but those positive tests has really come from the training room, the locker room, the travel, things of that nature, not really from the competition. So again, we can take all of those things, institute the policies that we need to institute to help keep our people safe. So great decision, in my opinion, from the membership, and a lot learned, and we're going to be able to move forward.
Thank you. With that, as we move forward, let me let Charles jump in here and ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, Dr. McClelland, I wanted to ask, we've recently had the media day for basketball this past Monday and Tuesday, and I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what the safety protocols will look like for the basketball season as we move toward the spring.
Well, from a student athlete's perspective, as you know, the NCAA has introduced their resocialization to intercollegiate sports plan, and it calls for testing 3 times a week. What we have done within the Southwestern Athletic Conference is said that the NCAA standard is the Southwestern Athletic Conference standard. But we've taken an extra step and said that for every SWAC competition, that there must be a negative test. So for example, for the sport of basketball, you know, we're Saturday, Monday. So you must have either a PCR or rapid antigen test prior to that game. Preferably, most of our institutions are doing PCR tests. So within that PCR test, that's between 24 and 72 hours. We get those results back. We have a form that you must certify and ensure that the student athlete has tested negative, the coaches have tested negative. And then you play that game on Saturday, you move on Monday, and we are now working on an agreement that conference members, if they don't have the ability to do so, to be able to have a rapid antigen test. The technology on that has really moved, and in the movement, it's almost like, you know, I hate to bring this in, but I think it gives a great example. When you take a pregnancy test, you get 2 lines for negative, 1 line for positive, or vice versa, however it goes. There's some COVID tests out there now that has that same type of technology where you don't need lab equipment. So, and it's very cost effective, somewhere between $18 and $23. So we're going to be able to test. We're going to be able to test a lot. We're going to be able to test efficiently. And we start talking about the difference of the reliability from rapid antigen to PCR. You can increase the reliability of rapid antigen by having multiple tests. So we're finalizing all of those things. We have a document that we've released. The NCAA has released one as well about on-court decorum, wearing masks, where do you put the scores table, do you move the benches, who wears masks. We're probably going to do away with the pregame team captains meeting. We're going to do away with the post-game handshake. So there are a lot of things in there that we're going to try to utilize to keep not just student athletes safe, but everyone involved.
With that, as I know you're up against it, wanted to ask about spring sports, but I think you jumped in there and talked about how things are moving forward. So really wanted to get into a little more of the big announcement that came out also during the summer for the SWAC was the expansion of the SWAC with Florida A&M University and Bethune-Cookman University in terms of becoming the 11th and 12th members of the SWAC. Tell us a little bit about the insight in regards to how that came about and or what is the big plans for the SWAC moving forward, and how does this really take the Southwestern Athletic Conference, in your mind, to the next level?
Yeah, I don't know much about insight. I like to take a lot of credit for it, Doc, but I can't. Right place at the right time. Florida A&M and Bethune was definitely a bonanza for the Southwestern Athletic Conference. But, FAMU kind of started the process in saying, we wanted to take a look at the Southwestern Athletic Conference. We think it fits geographically. We think we can reduce travel. And a lot of this came from Florida A&M looking at ways to balance their budget. And in the state of Florida, especially at public institutions, that is a significant thing. And if you look back through the history of Florida A&M, that has always been a reoccurring theme, balancing the budget. As we work our way through looking at the football schedule, we kind of looked at Florida A&M and said, hey, although they're in Florida, they are in relative proximity to a fair amount of our institutions being on that I-10 corridor. Even the state of Texas, you're talking about 9 hours being able to go from Houston to Tallahassee, Florida, where from Houston to Huntsville, Alabama, you're talking about 13 hours. So they're even closer than even some of our farthest members, Arkansas and Pine Bluff. So our ability to be able to talk to FAMU from a standpoint of rivalries, shortened travel. You're going to be able to join the conference that have led FCS attendance 43 years. So you're going to be able to get larger crowds, in our opinion. And just the geographical footprint and the rivalry aspect of it was great. Went through the process. Bethune-Cookman made contact as well. And it wasn't a package deal like a lot of people thought. It was separate and autonomous from each other. But once Florida A&M decided to make the move, Bethune-Cookman said, hey, we want to do an exploratory opportunity with the Southwestern Athletic Conference. Once they did it, they saw it made sense for them. Again, adding another institution that has a storied program, their overall budget is, they're going to rank second in the Southwestern Athletic Conference when they come in. Strong academic programs, strong athletic programs. Now we have a travel partner with Florida A&M. We have 12 teams. It's good to go. And we're just excited to have both of those fine institutions a part of our conference.
No doubt about it. I think as we wait for Dr. Cavil to come back on, it looks like I might have a little technical difficulties there. But Dr. McClelland, some of the things that you've outlined in terms of the protocol and things of that nature, kudos, and we thank you in terms of your leadership as you've shown with the Southwestern Athletic Conference in terms of putting the student athlete first, putting the fans first, and it goes a long way in terms of trying to move forward with having a Southwestern Athletic Conference spring schedule.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate that, Charles. And you talk about right place at the right time. We talked about that. Who would have known when we entered the pandemic that we were going to be able to bring in, Bethune-Cookman and FAMU, and then another coup for basketball. Mo Williams joins Alabama State to give us another tier of exposure, and then at your beloved institution, Jackson State University. The prime time effect, has come in. So, we've had a good year despite the pandemic as far as growth and expansion and media exposure. And, I can't take all of the credit. Probably can't take any credit at all. There are a lot of people doing a lot of great things to allow us to make this transition into, 2020 and 2021. And again, we're just excited and hope that we can continue to move this athletic conference forward so all fans and all constituents can continue to be excited about what we're doing.
No doubt about it.
With that, this is Dr. Bill inside the HBCU Sports Lab with SWAC Commissioner Dr. Charles McClelland. Certainly know your schedule is busy and you have a prior scheduled meeting. So thank you for joining us for this special episode with the NASSS Virtual Conference. And we'll look forward to talking to you soon when you have some new updates.
Well, we're working on it. So that's where I'm leaving now, going to try to get to some more updates. So we'll stay tuned.
We certainly will. Thanks again, Charles. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
With that, it's Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We will take a quick break here, and we'll bring right back with Dr. Geremy Cheeks as he provides you with a purpose statement and theoretical framework in regards to this special edition of Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with NASSS Virtual Conference.
This is Brian Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Wrap. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Wrap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Shop Velvet Online Women's Boutique to spice up your closet with trendy, unique looks. We have fashionable and chic looks at very affordable prices. Velvet Boutique offers free shipping all year long on all orders. Shop online at www.melvetboutique.com. That's www.melvetboutique.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. Shop Velvet Online Women's Boutique.
All right. Hopefully you all enjoyed that first segment in here. Again, I'm going to try to tie some of this into the academic side of what we do. I know I'm a little bit up against time, so forgive me if I run through some of these things relatively fast. All right. So realistically, again, going back to what our purpose is, the purpose of this presentation / roundtable session is to highlight how HBCU Sports Radio, in particular, Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Huddle, serves the purpose, or Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, serves the purpose of counter storytelling, right? Oftentimes, what we do understand is that HBCUs for a long time, since their inception, have been operating somewhat on the margins, right? Understanding essentially who this country is, what this country is made of, what we essentially started and founded this country on. Race obviously plays a huge role in how we perceive not only sports, but how we perceive those ancillary areas around sport. All right. That's part of my slide, man. Go to the statement of the purpose. In looking at this, essentially, we're looking to employ both critical race theory as well as institutional distancing. And I'm going to also take the time to introduce you all to another concept that we have found ourselves, butting up against as well, in this notion of emancipatory journalism. And again, how that all ties in together with what we're doing here. All right. Going into this notion again of how institutional racism plays a huge role in our perception, and not only our perception, but essentially how we communicate with one another. It shapes everything from not only the communication piece, but not only the perception piece, but what we are able to do as far as galvanizing those particular individuals, as well as representing our culture, and then ultimately the formulation of that culture as well. All right. The HBCU experience, and I know a lot of people probably listening to this presentation understand essentially the dichotomy that exists, if you will, about HBCU culture versus what we refer to as historically white colleges and universities, and what that culture looks like. Myself, as a Florida A&M University, proud graduate of Florida A&M University, Rattlers, we are everywhere. I got to experience that firsthand. And so a big part of what I do, a big part of what Dr. Cavil does, Charles does, and Mike, we all understand what is, nuanced, if you will, about this culture. And ultimately, we look to share this particular culture with everybody that we come in contact. Anybody that knows me knows that I, wear my affiliation with Florida A&M on my sleeve, and I will be willing to engage with anybody to tell me that Florida A&M University is the best university in the world. But that's neither here nor there. But understanding again how media works and the significance in media, it plays a huge role in, again, working to push out this narrative, pushing out this story. All right. So again, the purpose of this, going back to reiterate, the purpose of this presentation, the purpose of the dialogue really is to, again, show how what we do here with inside the HBCU Sports Lab works to move towards counter storytelling, for one, but also works again in an emancipatory journalistic side in reducing that gap in what we see in what we call institutional distancing, as well as employing the tenets of critical race theory to talk about how racism and race plays a huge role in, again, all those things that I just mentioned. Go to the theoretical framework slide. All right, so first, what we want to talk about, I'm going to just give you a brief synopsis, brief introduction, if you will, with critical race theory. Again, forgive me since we're up against the time. Some of this may be brief and I may be rushing into it, but I do encourage all of you all that are not familiar with these theoretical frameworks to explore on your own. Obviously, that's what we're all about in the world of education, is making sure not only giving people the information, but giving them the tools and access to the tools to be able to learn on their own as well. All right. While we work through this again, critical race theory, a lot of you all may be familiar with it, but it was born of critical legal studies. All right. And what critical race theory serves and what it does is it puts race and racism at the fore, understanding how integral and how ingrained they are in our society. Again, I don't have to tell everybody how deeply ingrained race and racism are given our current political climate. And what's going on right now from social landscape and ultimately what we're looking at as far as this presidential race. But CRT works as, again, this dynamic force in centering race and racism and understanding essentially how those elements play a huge part in everything that we essentially do in life, right? CRT employs a number of tenets, but what we're going to focus on today in the context of this presentation is counter storytelling, as well as whiteness as property. All right, those two tenets, I'm going to briefly go into those a little bit. But when we look at counter storytelling, as the name kind of implies, what it means is realistically, oftentimes dominant discourse dominates, as the name implies, dominates what you understand, what you see, and what is portrayed, if you will, to the masses, right? Rarely are we privy to hearing the insights, such as what we just heard from Dr. McClelland, hearing the insights from those actual marginalized people. And what CRT does, and this tenet of CRT does, is to magnify those voices, provide a space in which these voices can be heard and their stories can be told to combat what is the dominant narrative, right? When we move on to whiteness as property, whiteness as property entails this notion that whiteness in itself gives you access, gives you, or is the determining factor, is a determining factor of who has access to resources, who has access to property. Property therein can be defined in several different ways, but when we look at overall how we look at whiteness as property, it is used as a tool in ways to subvert and subjugate some other people who are not part of that particular, I guess, I don't want to say skin color because we all understand how race works, but if you are not essentially in the fold of whiteness, then you are denied ultimately the privileges of those property rights, if you will. All right. Institutional distancing. All right. Now, this might be something that a lot of you, some of you may not necessarily be as familiar with, but institutional distancing deals with it, looking at things from a class perspective. We understand how socioeconomics work. It oftentimes is the haves versus the have-nots. Well, it's not just about the haves and the have-nots, but essentially how power and control dictate who has access, again, to those resources. So, and when we look at institutional distancing at the HBCU standpoint, going back to the understanding how race and racism have been endemic in our society, and how Black people have been marginalized, our educational systems have been marginalized as well. Subsequently, HBCU athletics in that. So when we look at broader Division I and even broader NCAA athletics, we understand that there is somewhat of a class system, whether we outright call it that, but it is something to be acknowledged. So institutional distancing works within the confines of keeping some resources for oneself and diminishing the perception of the other class to keep them away from those particular resources. All right. And then lastly, when we look at this notion of emancipatory journalism, right? Emancipatory journalism is along the lines of understanding, again, going back to the voice of marginalized individuals, understanding the power and breadth of media. Media is one of those mediums in which we utilize to enunciate those particular voices. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is one of those devices in which we would like to be viewed as an emancipatory journalism and an emancipatory journalistic approach. So speaking for those marginalized individuals, speaking their truths, giving you insight from those particular places and not from a deficit perspective. Right. And with that, I'll take it back to Dr. Kenyatta Cavil and Charles Bishop as they take you back through some more segments in reference to inside the HBCU Sports Lab.
Thank you for that. As we have our moderator, Dr. Geremy Cheeks, bringing it to us. This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. As we get back into our discussion in terms of Act 2, you've heard the purpose and the theoretical framework. With that, we're going to be discussing now, Charles, I want to get into a topic that you're probably familiar with. It will bring a smile to your face. We're going to look at Deion Sanders. Has support lined up for Jackson State University. You know the NFL and Major League Baseball Hall of Famer Bo Jackson, who is a motivational speaker, offered to visit Jackson State for free. Statements from Jackson State talking about, I'm not bragging, it's a blessing. I have cooperation that paid me to come, or corporations, I should say, that paid me to come around the country and speak to employees or at their seminars. Jackson State and his 21st and Prime podcast, he talked a little more about this. So I'm going to say this to you, as he was quoted as saying, I'm going to wait for you to invite me down to come to speak to your boys on the house. The only thing I'll accept is you getting me there. And that is legendary people coming in and supporting him. When you talk about Shannon Sharp's, his show, his podcast, when he looks at Club Shay Shay, going in there, you have reports of Snoop Dogg really getting into his thoughts about Prime and the importance of Prime, going to the HBCU. You have some insight. You were actually there when Coach Prime, as he talks about, was introduced to Jackson State people. Talk a little bit about that, and in concert, him being able to line up the support. Why is that so important, in your opinion, for not just Jackson State, but the SWAC as well as other HBCUs?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about a paradigm shift in terms of an individual with a global brand like Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, coming to Jackson State University. And one of the things that you really kind of take a look at is why did he choose Jackson State? And Jackson State actually has a brand unto itself that can match what Deion is bringing to it. When he was announced, we saw all the fanfare in terms of the police escort in and things of that nature. But he really brought an enthusiasm to the Jackson State fan base. I was not shocked, but somewhat surprised in terms of he doing the research in terms of the history of Jackson State. And he mentioned during his introductory press conference in terms of I looked at Jackson State as an institution that really kind of matched what I wanted to do, and it was a sort of a perfect marriage, and it sort of had a sort of a church feel to it, if you will, in the introductory press conference in terms of just bringing that excitement back to a fan base that has a tremendous tradition of great athletics, great football. You talk about the 4 Hall of Famers in terms of Lem Barney, Walter Payton, Jackie Slater, and now Robert Brazile. So I tell you, it was truly an event that you had to be at, and really it brings goosebumps to me now just thinking about Coach Prime coming to my alma mater.
Yeah, I thought that was fascinating when you bring that all up, and the insight that you get to talk about your personal experience of being in the house. And I know that this is a conference and you're extremely professional, but you can smile a little bit, man. I know you're proud and you're pissed about. You're trying to keep your composure for all these people out here, but you're not kidding me. I've seen all this before from your perspective, so I kid you because I care. But yeah, it's been momentous. It's been interesting to really see at just a high level when we're talking the branding capacity. You continue to see Coach Prime on all these different commercials. And then you see him on these interviews and it always says, Coach Prime, Jackson State University, Southwestern Athletic Conference. Or you see him in his various interviews and he has Jackson State University apparel on, whether it's a cap or a shirt, the color schemes. And I'm talking about he's been on so many different platforms. And a lot of these platforms are the major platforms such as Good Morning America, and then more regional or particular cultural interviews that he's had in regards to that. So it's been fascinating in so many different ways when you talk about his ability to navigate this space and talk with various contingencies within what we would refer to this culture, this HBCU culture, or this black culture, the sporting HBCU diaspora. From various platforms, whether it's on YouTube, regional works, or whether it's, like we said, in terms of ESPN interviews for that framework. What have your thoughts been on just seeing the enormity in terms of what that looks like?
It's been tremendous, and like you mentioned, every time you see him via social media or whatever now, he has some sort of Jackson State branding. And it just swells you over pride in terms of you looking and saying, "Wow, that's my university. That's on Good Morning America, if you will." So I mean, it's been tremendous in terms of looking at Coach Prime elevating the brand of Jackson State University, and you're looking forward to what all that he can bring, because he has talked extensively about really changing the face of not just Jackson State, but of HBCU athletics in general, in terms of trying to get some of that talent to come back to HBCUs.
With that, I wanted to get into this next topic or area, if you would. The Doug Williams Center Advisory Board welcomes Denise Young and Michelle Willis. So you talk about some diversity on this side of it in regards to the extension and all the powerful names. We just had an interview with Dr. Charles McClelland. He's on this advisory board. The NFL has individuals on this advisory board. And anybody that's connected with HBCU knows some of the names on this board. But then you also have some names that go outside, if you would, of the HBCU framework. And for those that are not familiar with this from this perspective, the Doug Williams Center is a center that will talk about race, sports, and politics, if you would. From a academic perspective, research perspective, but also in terms of foundational information in regards to what this looks like. A statement was made from Brandon Logan, and I want you to come back and comment on what are your thoughts in terms of what that looks like. Brandon Logan said, quote, "Ms. Young has made significant impact on the culture of inclusion in technology industry, and I fully expected that she will bring the same level of impact to sports world with us. When it comes to building progress across collegiate sports. I recognize Ms. Willis' contribution to the NCAA as an extremely valuable. We are looking forward to creating pathways for advancement with them on the board in terms of the center, as they named Doug Williams Center for HBCU Sports and Politics. What are your thoughts in terms of this dynamics? Ms. Willis quoted, before I get you into that, just to make it full circle, talked about the fact that sports is an extension of our society. As a race and politics affects our everyday lives, good or bad, it also affects sports and its participants at all levels. Charles, what are your thoughts in regards to the center first, and particularly the addition to these young ladies to the advisory board?
Really excited about the research that can move forward from this center. This is tremendous in terms of really looking at some foundational issues in terms of race, sports, and politics. And we've talked about it on this show on more than a few occasions. All three of these dynamics, they don't operate separately. They commingle. And going forward, this is what we will be seeing in terms of the climate of this country. And to actually have a place where you have individuals who are researching solutions to really move the needle, if you will, in terms of talking about sports and politics and race and how it all commingles. This is tremendous, and this is something that I really look forward to what they will add to the medium of sports as a whole.
Well, Charles, you know, I'm excited about the center in regards to what this could be for HBCUs to really dig in deep into the research to find out how these things move forward. So in a lot of ways, I'm excited about the Center of Race, Sports, and Politics in regards to how it matches up with a significant brand at HBCU Sports. Let's be frank when we talk about Grambling, and as they love to say around that part, the G. And I know that brings a little difference to your face there with those matchups with Jackson State and Grambling over the years. But, you know, it's fine. Y'all got Coach Prime. They got the center. We'll see how that works out going back and forth. Maybe they'll do some work and some research on Jackson State and Coach Prime to see how that works out. But even Doug Williams was excited about the fact that Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, was taking the job position at Jackson State. He jumped in there and was so excited about that in terms of that. So it's fascinating when you start hearing things. Another quote here by Dennis Young. I want to get a little more thoughts on that, and then we'll move into some other HBCU subject area. But quote was saying, race and politics play out in every aspect of sports, sports access, leadership, ownership, and engagement within society, said Denise Young, excuse me. It is a critical business and social model that can lag or lead in influencing progress in race relationships and representation, end quote. Again, play a little more in regards to, as you just completed your master's in sports studies and sports leadership and all the research and the practicality coming from out of that space when you were just a fan and just talking about it, how does this resonate with you more than maybe it did even a short 2 or 3 years ago?
I think the first thing is it's another resource for research. And, you know, as we're constantly turning over more bricks for more research and things of that nature. So to have another area and another leading voice, if you will, in terms of talking about race and politics. So that, as Dr. Ville, as you point out, as being a researcher, you never stop turning over leaves looking for more and more information. So that's one of those things that really jumped out, and I'm really excited about what Denise Young brings to this center.
Great point. Let's jump on over here. This time we're going to go outside. We've been talking about the players in regards on the coaching side. Obviously, a little historical note there. We also talked about the gender equity, diversity, and the center in regards to research on that side. Let's take it off in terms of the clothing. Morgan State University announces agreement with Under Armour. This came from HBCU Game Day and Morgan State Athletics. The agreement starts in 2020 will allow Morgan State to provide Under Armour uniforms, apparel, gear, and equipment for its complete roster of student athletes, coaches, athletic department personnel, and the campus community. Fascinating. What are your thoughts with this partnership with Under Armour and Morgan State? Obviously, Morgan State is in Maryland, Baltimore, for those that may not know, and Under Armour itself is based out of Baltimore. What are your thoughts on this partnership? We can talk about the fact that adding into that, Jackson State, as you smile, is leaving Nike and they're going to Under Armour. So now you have Southern University, Texas Southern University, and Jackson State University in the SWAC. The 12-member SWAC it will be in 2021. 3 of those 12 schools will have Under Armour, and now you have Morgan State. Talk about Under Armour, and as you know, at one time, just recently, the conference had a conference deal with Russell. And now you're having these individual deals, including that. Prairie View's with Adidas, right? Alabama A&M is with Adidas. You talk about FAMU in terms of their most recent deal, in terms of what they're looking at and how it was a prosperous deal as they're making their move transitioning for Nike in terms of their next deal. What are your thoughts about these individual agreements versus conference agreements when it was broken down?
Well, I mean, let me take a look at it from a Jackson State standpoint, and especially with Coach Prime being such a prominent Under Armour endorser. Taking a look at it from Jackson State standpoint, it's huge. And one of the individuals who was on the Jackson State podcast, Tiger Talk with 1400 Club, he really talked about having a personal relationship with having somebody to talk to within Under Armour versus going through a third party, which I think a lot of our HBCUs sort of do with these apparel deals. So I think that's going to be huge. When you take a look at Under Armour's sort of a dive into the HBCU world, when you have an individual like Deion Sanders who brings that global notoriety, I think that's going to be huge in terms of what these individual schools can do with Under Armour. So I'm really looking forward to some of the things, especially with regards to trying to mail some of those traditional looks that our HBCUs have had with some sort of, new looks, if you will, to create a whole different paradigm of branding with Under Armour. So looking forward to those sorts of things. It should be fun.
No doubt about it. Great points on that. I'm going to be frank with you. I'm wondering what took so long. I mean, Baltimore, Maryland, Morgan State, I'm surprised that they didn't jump on this earlier, especially when the MEAC moved from the Russell deal. And they had about 10 schools that went to Nike, and the rest of them 3 at that time when you had 13 members of the SWAC. I mean, of the MEAC, 11 of them playing football. This is as Savannah State is transitioning out. Hampton obviously was transitioned out. Now we know North Carolina A&T, as well as Bethune-Cookman and FAMU will be jumping out. Now I'm going to let Geremy chip in here a little bit since he did his undergraduate study at FAMU, and let him chime in just a little bit as he's being the host. But he gets a chance now. We're going to give him some star power to jump in here and get in the mix in terms of what that looks like. But frankly, I was surprised that Under Armour didn't come to Morgan State University a little earlier in terms of looking at this deal. Kudos for the athletic director over there, Dr. Scott, to look at this opportunity and understand the regional value of what this looks like. And it's my understanding they got a really good deal in terms of how they were able to navigate that space and get it done. With that being said, Dr. Geremy Cheeks, you teach this, right? You lecture about sport management, but you are obviously a proud alumni of FAMU University. Now they're coming to the SWAC. Talk about what were your thoughts in terms of this decision as it played out and the importance of this apparel deal as we get ready for our second interview here.
Sure. What I will say again, because it's my ties run a little bit deeper, as you all know. It's not only that I was an alum, but I also am a former employee of Florida A&M University in collegiate athletics, particularly in marketing and promotions. So for me, again, a lot of this stuff is near and dear to my heart in the sense of watching and seeing how this stuff has grown over the years. As far as FAMU moving into the SWAC, again, even when I was there, an undergraduate, I ain't going to date myself right now, but when I was there in undergraduate, we talked about that of why weren't we in the SWAC in the first place? When FAMU tried to make the jump from 1AA at the time, when it was labeled as 1AA to 1A, a lot of people thought that after that move, we were actually going to try to make that jump to the SWAC. Because it made sense for a lot of reasons. A lot of what Dr. McClelland said before, as far as geographics are concerned, as far as rivalries, as far as what we look at as far as consumer behavior in the SWAC, as far as not only how well most SWAC schools travel, but how well supported a lot of SWAC institutions are. And FAM, depending on who you talk to, and especially you talk to me, FAM can compete with anybody. So we know that we essentially are going to, run the table wherever we go. And so we were always ready for some more new competition, as well as, bringing what we have to offer by way of not only our global fan network, but also essentially our notoriety as a premier institution. And then moving beyond that, looking at this apparel deal with Under Armour and Morgan State, what I talk to my students about, and I think what you all would also be, cognizant of in the sense is that this time that we're in, and the social climate that we're in, what we have been witnessing over the past several years is a continued spotlight into HBCUs and subsequently HBCU athletics. Given the social climate that we're in which people are now looking to, reshape their identities in some ways, as well as get back to their identities. And what HBCUs offer you is that opportunity to be yourself, right? So as I talk to students, as I talk to other people about why they make decisions to go to HBCUs, one of the main things they say is this notion of being able to be who I am, grow as a person in who I am, and be around other like-minded individuals. Well, now what we're starting to see, and especially now with Dion going to Jackson State, is an increased antenna, if you will, for HBCUs and what HBCUs bring to the table. Stuff that we've been talking about for years, but now people are actually starting to see it at the forefront and understand essentially we do have a lot to offer. You look at what ESPN did by picking up a number of our games. You look at, even what BET just did with the virtual homecomings, right? We understand that there is value in who we are, our culture, and ultimately what we can bring to the table. And I think Under Armour recognizes this and was smart in trying to garner more attention and garner more support from HBCUs in this particular space. And I look for more major corporations and other apparel providers to try to get into this again, because what we do know is that, again, HBCUs have tremendous value. And the world is starting to see essentially the value that we hold, and that we will continue to increase that value over the years.
With that, as we come up on it, we'll spend a couple of minutes with Dr. Travion Scott, Southern University Deputy Executive Athletic Director. And so we're going to give a chance. We spent some time with the commissioner. Now we're going to go to an institutional side, and obviously a little SWAC heavy here, but wanted to give a chance to give some insight of what it looks like on one of our campuses. This is one of the what I call young guns in terms of the conference. He may not say he's that young, but he is in that executive leadership role, but he is preparing himself to take the next shot. He's on what I call some of the hot lists in regards to the next athletic director, VP of athletics, as they call it at many institutions. So now we're going to give you a chance to see the nexus. What does it look like? Somebody that is in the trenches at an institution, but is in really the momentum of preparing itself to become the captain of the ship at that level. So with that, without further ado, we have Dr. Travion Scott. How's it going these days down there on the bluff in Baton Rouge, Southern University? I think he's on. I'm not sure if he can hear us there. Let's see if we can plug him in. See if we can get you a little sound there. Can you hear what we're saying? We can't hear you there.
We got him unmuted.
Yeah. As we check on that, we're getting to the top of the hour, so we have to close. But we can see if we can fix these technical difficulties. So you're getting to see a little bit of inside of all the things that goes on when you're doing a production and show. It happens in those many ways. Let's see if we can reach back out to Dr. Travion Scott. Do we have you there? Can we hear you now? As we're doing that, let me ask you a little bit about Charles, as we get this straight in terms of Dr. Travion Scott. Let's go into this phenomenon with Chris Paul. Fans can win shoes from HBCU sneakers. You've seen what he did during NBA as they were in the bubble. With Chris Paul leading the vote there in North Carolina, announcing that he's back in school and he is attending Winston-Salem State and the sneaker tour in a lot of ways. What were your thoughts on Chris Paul there?
Tremendous. I mean, to take a look at Chris Paul bringing light, if you will, to all these HBCUs, and I think we've talked about on the show, man, it would be nice to for those sneakers to be available because they would be a hot seller, and he really brought light during on HBCUs during when everybody kind of has their eyeballs on the NBA playoffs. So it was tremendous to watch Chris Paul do that.
All right, let's see if we can go back to Dr. Travion Scott. I think we may have got some of those technical difficulties out the way. Travion Scott, are you there? Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. I hate that happens to it. I had the young gun on, man, and he likes to bring it, boy. He was going to give you some fascinating input. What we'll do is we will give him even more shine. So tune in next Tuesday. We will bring back and we will have Travion Scott, and we'll work on that frame, and we'll bring him live and on next Tuesday. We'll bring him on the show. So tune in at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time, and we'll do that. With that, let's go back to Dr. Geremy Cheeks and let him wrap it up for us. And then for those that are out there, you can chime in and ask some questions either by text, or you can go into the Facebook Live chat. If you have some questions, start texting me in and have the questions, and we'll see if we can answer them as Dr. Geremy Cheeks is giving you a wrap up on Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. As we said, Mike Washington is on assignment. We have Dr. Geremy Cheeks, a assistant professor out of Alabama A&M, bringing us a closure in terms of the dialectical framework of what we're talking about with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Go ahead.
Thank you for that, good doctor. What I'm gonna do here, and I'm gonna kind of be relatively brief again, because I think that we would welcome again the interaction with those of you all that are paying attention and logged on with us. But going back to again our purpose, what our purpose was for this particular project, for this particular presentation was for you all to see essentially what we consider to be emancipatory journalism as referenced in scholarly works, with this notion of being able to change the narrative, shift the narrative in what you essentially hear versus, what the perception has been put out there as, versus essentially who we are and what we identify as and with, right? From an academic standpoint, again, when we understand how institutional distancing works, we understand that there are certain measures taken to essentially marginalize certain groups of people as to devalue essentially who they are, right? And what we do, and what hopefully you all have experienced, is this particular show serves as a platform in which we not only give insight, into some of the interworkings and some of the thought processes, as you saw with Dr. McClelland, about things that go on from an administrative and a organizational capacity, but looking at it from, again, the standpoint of understanding how the narrative can be shifted by showing that value that we that we bring in ourselves, but also try to promote and project to other people, right? What we try to do again in this particular presentation is bring you all into how we interweave academic perspective with, again, those cultural representations of HBCU athletics. By bringing in these particular guests, again, what you're seeing is how the cultural nuances can still lend themselves, if you will, to academic interpretation as well as academic, as theorization, if you would, right? Additionally, how we look at it as far as what we have shown you all today is trying to promote, again, the value in voice, right? So, again, understanding that we find ourselves in this position to be those with a platform and those with viewership to be able to push this narrative forward. As insiders, we essentially are using our particular voices to not only, again, increase the value and the perception of HBCUs and HBCU athletics, but again, reshape that narrative, but add and build on to the legacy that we have built over the years. Again, if you understand anything about HBCUs and HBCU athletics and the nuances that go into HBCUs and HBCU athletics, they're everything but less than their counterparts. So what we want to do is, again, change that narrative to move, as one of our good brothers, friends of the show, Dr. Joey Cooper, always told Dr. Cavil and myself, we have to change this narrative and change from this deficit mindset. The deficit mindset is a direct reflection of what has been thrown out and what has been told through media representation, as well as through, again, not first-hand accounts, but second-hand accounts, right? If you talk to anybody who has been to an HBCU, they'll tell you maybe there were a few bad experiences, but ultimately being an alum or being involved in the HBCU culture is a life-changing experience. So reshaping that mind frame to not work from a deficit mind frame, but also understanding, again, the value that we have and the value that we can show and portray to people to also increase and change their mindset, change their perceptions of what we do, which essentially becomes what we call emancipatory journalism in action. So hopefully from what you all saw today, you all were included in this particular process as we creatively express ourselves and creatively find ways to change that narrative of what it means to be involved with HBCU athletics, but also changing that narrative of what it means to be an academician, but also getting on being involved in this other form of activism by shaping that narrative, getting insight from those individuals, and then ultimately, again, building on the platform with what we have available. So with that, I'll kick it back to Dr. Cavil, and we'll open it up for you all to ask any questions that you may have.
Certainly, as we are allowing folks to jump in here and ask some questions, I want to go back to Charles Bishop and give him a chance to talk about his thoughts on the show today in regards to this new opportunity and the partnership with NASSS, North American Society of Sports Sociologists, and this virtual convention and space we're in. What are your thoughts in terms of what's taking place today?
Well, first and foremost, Dr. Field, thank you for allowing me on this show. This was tremendous in terms of bringing what we do every Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time to this conference. What we do is we get an opportunity to talk HBCU athletics and the business of HBCU athletics, and it's a great medium that you've opened up and allowed me to come on to really indulge my interest in terms of bringing that to our fans, and it's tremendous in terms of going forward and really talking about not only the games, but the people around the games, the commissioners, the SIDs, the athletic directors, who really bring a different framework, and they're not always seen. So very appreciative.
No problem with that. Before we get to any more of these questions, or certainly as we get to a close, I think it is appropriate for those that tuned in today, got a chance in here. I want to make sure we give some accolades to those individuals. Don and Kofi, Chuck Hunt is always supporting us in so many different ways. Carlos Brown, he does a show out of Baton Rouge every Saturday from 10 to 12. He's jumped in here. He's always supported us so many different ways. I want to give a shout out to Kate Johnson, Jackson State big time supporter, alumni there. Good afternoon. She's coming out of Atlanta representing and giving us a shout out today. So I wanted to make sure we did that. Also wanted to make sure I give Dr. Courtney Flowers. She is a colleague of mine at Texas Southern University. She is extremely dynamic. She'll be presenting tomorrow, so make sure you check her out. But not only that, just the way that she has encouraged me and pushed me to do platforms such as this, and the way that we've developed the Sport Management Sport Studies program at Texas Southern University with a focus on understanding diversity and inclusion and equity, and as well as understanding from an institutional perspective with our work strategically on HBCU institutions and what we refer to in so many different ways as a sporting HBCU diaspora, the HBCU sports culture. So look for more to come as we continue to do that from Texas Southern University with not only our presentations but our academic work, and really boots to the ground in regards to being the front line in what takes place there at Texas Southern University and many HBCUs throughout the country, and serve our HWCUs that support us in regards to the work we're doing, and colleagues, which brings me none other to Dr. Billy Hawkins that's over there at the University of Houston. He has supported me when we first met doing the work he did at the University of Georgia, bringing me into the fold in a lot of ways, as well as Dr. Akilah Carter, who was the individual that introduced me to Dr. Geremy Cheeks and pushed us forward in regards to doing their work and creating a partnership with there. Without that, I would be remiss if I didn't give a final thank you to brother Dr. Algerian Hart in terms of the work he has done to encourage me to continue to move forward. Great accolades, certainly in terms of the work that he's done with bringing NASSS as the chair of developing this committee from a virtual platform, extremely challenging times, but finding a way and to get it done, and just as importantly, giving us this space here. So I wanted to give a special thanks to those individuals and all the membership of NASSS in regards to the support they have given me over the years. So want to give that final thanks as we start to sign off. With that, I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports and College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop, as we bring you this special edition of NASSS Virtual Conference right here out of Houston, Texas. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Dr. Charles McClelland, the Commissioner of the SWAC. Again, we thank you for listening to Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, and our moderator of our session today, Dr. Geremy Cheeks. Without that, I'd also like to give a special shout out to Roy Evans, our producer who's behind the scene, that making all this work in so many different ways. The partnership I've had with him and the great relationship we have continues to bring it forward. Should have known he's a FAMU alumni. He talks about striking again. So the Rattlers find a way to be in the space, but now we can officially welcome you all to the SWAC. So it's going to get much bigger and better as we continue to move forward, along with Bethune-Cookman University. Wildcats out there giving shout outs to Jashelle Mitchell, football operations manager, diversity and inclusion. She's working on her doctorate, so she's coming this way. And she's snuck and gave me that hat there, so I want to make sure I give her some love, as we do wear hats on the show for those that send us the HBCU gear. With that, we look forward to next week. We will discuss with you the latest news on the HBCU Lab at our normal time. That's every Tuesday at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil. That's DrKenyattaCavil, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Dream big and continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Course lecture
dismissed.